everybody, welcome back to another business analysis video. So in today's video I will be talking about user story refinement, talking through how to answer this if it's asked during your business analyst interview, and I would also explain what user stories are, user story refinement, and give more details about why it's important. So you might have come across the term user story refinement, backlog grooming, backlog refinement. What do these mean? What are the differences? Are there differences? Generally, user story refinement and backlog grooming pretty much means the same thing, right? So in user story refinement, you are revisiting the details and clarity of a story and filling any gaps. You are checking to ensure that your stories are ready. You're checking to ensure that you've split your epics, your stories are prioritized, and ready for the dev team to pick up and estimate. So I thought to come back on this user story. Do you know what user story means? Do you know what epic means? Do you know what acceptance criteria means? If you'd like to know that, I have another video in my list of videos. Check that out before you watch this video so that you really understand what I'm talking about, okay? So a good guide generally for your user story refinement is to have at least 2 sprints worth of work in your product backlog. And this should generally be done before sprint planning to avoid any confusion amongst the team. So your reason generally for refining your user stories is to get them ready and done. Now, what do we mean by ready and what do we mean by done? So you need to get them ready so that the team can execute them when they are moved into the current sprint, and then the team can get them done. Okay, so those are the two differences when you're in a team or in a project and people are talking about user story refinement, user story getting ready, and user story getting done. Okay, so what brings up the need for user story refinement? Generally, you have a big picture or epics created in the backlog, and this is a big picture of everything that your product needs to deliver, needs to have in order to meet requirements, right? So you would understand this because you've interacted with the stakeholders, you understand what the features are, you understand what the requirements are. But do other people within the team understand it? Will other stakeholders understand it, right? So you need to go back to size and estimate for effort, estimate for implementation. You also need to go back and tidy up. You need to split, meaning breaking down your epics to user stories and breaking down your user stories to acceptance criteria, adding mock-ups and examples of certain detail that your product must meet. And you also want to order your product backlog or your stories in the right priority. You want to ensure that they're prioritized so that the team can just pick up from the list of prioritized stories. Now, why is it important? I'm sure you already can gather from what I've talked about why it's important to refine your user stories. One reason is that without a shared understanding, there is a risk of wrong implementation and wasted effort, or having to rework the implementation to get it right, right? So if nobody really understands within the team, if there's no shared understanding, you might end up delivering the wrong requirements. You know, you might end up wasting time trying to understand what a ticket means. If your user stories aren't clear and understandable by the dev team, they've wasted time creating the wrong thing, and then you're wasting time going back to explain. So it's really necessary for you to do those story refinements. Another reason is also for the prioritization reason. Without prioritizing, you risk working on items that are not important and miss important ones, right? So if your backlog is not prioritized, you pick up the ones that aren't needed in the time. So you're wasting time working on the less important bits, right? generally, prioritizing needs, you have to pick from what's more important, right? This applies in life in general, right? So this is right. So my battery died. So prioritizing, you have to prioritize so that the team doesn't end up picking the wrong tickets, or the team doesn't end up working on tickets that aren't needed in the time. And finally, without sizing each item, you also have to spend time with the team to size each item within your product backlog or within your sprint bucket, whatever you're moving on to the next sprint. So if you don't size each item, you don't take cost of item into account. You don't take time and resources as well into account. So you have to size them as well in the user story refinement task. So other words that people tend to call this user story refinement or backlog grooming. People also call it pre-planning. People also call it story time or backlog management. Okay, just so you know, these all generally mean the same thing. Next is when. When do you need to do user story refinement? User story refinement is an ongoing activity for the entire team, and generally the product owner would give the direction of when, or give you generally the direction of necessity for the refinement of story. And the guide is to have, I think I already mentioned, at least 2 sprints worth of refined stories. And the outcome of these activities is to have a refined product backlog ready for implementation. Right, so I was thinking exactly how do you even answer the question if it comes up in interview. How would you refine user stories? So what I would kind of say off the top of my head is I refine user stories by interacting with the stakeholders or interacting with the team to understand really what the highest level requirements are. If we already have these requirements in the backlog, I'm looking and identifying stories or epics that are not detailed enough, and having these in a list so that I can approach the stakeholders involved in order to gather more detail and clarify the stories. So this is how I refine my user stories. I would also, from identifying my epics, work through these by identifying the features, identifying who the users are, what they want, and why they want certain requirements. Going further, adding my mock-ups, examples, dev notes, and acceptance criteria, so that the stories are as detailed as possible for dev team to pick up. So off the top of my head, that's what I would say. I hope I've been able to help. I hope you found this worthwhile, and I hope that it applies for you if it ever comes up in your, I don't know why I just did this, if it ever comes up in your interview. Right, that's the end of today's video. I hope you've enjoyed today's content. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, and do ask any questions you might have in the comment section below. And I will see you in my next one.